Hi, I'm Hobie1. This is Red Chair Reading. Tonight I am reading Midnight by the great Dean R. Koontz, the most terrifying book I have ever read. Chapter 3. Let's go. In the pantry off the kitchen, sitting on the floor with her back against a shelf of canned goods, Chrissy Foster looked at her watch. In the harsh light of the single bare bulb in the ceiling socket, she saw that she had been locked in that small, windowless chamber for nearly 9 hours. She had received the wristwatch on her 11th birthday, more than 4 months ago. And she had been thrilled by it because it was not a kid's watch with cartoon characters on the face. It was delicate, ladylike, gold-plated, with Roman numerals instead of digits, a real Timex. Like her mother wore, studying it, Chrissy was overcome by sadness. The watch represented a time of happiness and family togetherness that was lost forever. Besides feeling sad, lonely, and a little restless from hours of captivity, she was scared. Of course, she was not as scared as she had been that morning, when her father had carried her through the house and thrown her into the pantry, then kicking and screaming. She had been terrified because of what she had seen, because of what her parents had become. But that white-hot terror could not be sustained. Gradually it subsided to a low-grade fever of fear that made her feel flushed and chilled at the same time, queasy, headachy, almost as if she were in the early stages of flu. She wondered what they were going to do to her when they finally let her out of the pantry. Well, no, she didn't worry about what they were going to do, for she was pretty sure she already knew the answer to that one. They were going to change her into one of them. What she wondered about was how the change would be effected. And what exactly would she become? She knew that her mother and father were no longer ordinary people, that they were something else, but she had no words to describe what they had become. Her fear was sharpened by the fact that she lacked the words to explain to herself what was happening. In her own home, for she had always been in love with words and had faith in their power, she liked to read just about anything: poetry, short stories, novels, the daily newspaper, magazines, the backs of cereal boxes, if nothing else was at hand. She was in 6th grade at school, but her teacher, Mrs. Tokawa, said she read at a 10th grade level. When she was not reading, she was often writing stories of her own. Within the past year, she had decided she was going to grow up to write novels, like those of Mr. Paul Zindel, or the sublimely silly Mr. Daniel Pinkwater, or, best of all, those of Ms. Andre Norton. But now words failed. Her life was going to be far different from what she had imagined. She was frightened, as much as by the loss of the comfortable, bookish future she had foreseen, as she was by the changes that had taken place in her parents. 8 months shy of her 12th birthday, Chrissy had become acutely aware of life's uncertainty. Grim knowledge, for she was ill-prepared. Not that she had already given up. She intended to fight. She was not going to let them change her without resistance. Soon, after she had been thrown into the pantry, once her tears had dried, she had looked over the contents on the shelves. Searching for a weapon, the pantry contained mostly canned, bottled, and packaged food, but there were also laundry and first aid and handyman supplies. She had found the perfect thing, a small aerosol spray can of WD-40, an oil-based lubricant. It was a third the size of an ordinary spray can, easily concealed. If she could surprise them, spray it in their eyes, and temporarily blind them, she could make a break for freedom. As though reading a newspaper headline, she said, "Ingenious young girl saves self with ordinary household lubricant." She held the WD-40 in both hands, taking comfort from it. Now and then a vivid and unsettling memory recurred, her father's face as it had looked when he had thrown her into the pantry. Red and swollen with anger, his eyes darkly ringed, nostrils flared, lips drawn back from his teeth in a feral snarl. Every feature contorted with rage. "I'll be back for you," he said, spraying spittle as he spoke. "I'll be back." He slammed the door and braced it shut with a straight-backed kitchen chair that he wedged under the knob. Later, when the house fell silent and her parents seemed to have gone away, Chrissy had tried the door, pushing on it with all her might, but the tilted chair was an immovable barricade. "I'll be back for you. I'll be back." His twisted face and bloodshot eyes had made her think of Mr. Robert Louis Stevenson's description of the murderous Hyde in the story Dr. Jekyll, which she had read a few months ago. There was madness in her father. He was not the same. He was not. This dude was not the same man that he had once been. More unsettling was her memory of what she had seen in the upstairs hall when she had returned home after missing the school bus and had surprised her parents. No, they were not really her parents anymore. They were something else. She shuddered. She clutched the can of WD-40. Suddenly, for the first time in hours, she heard noise in the kitchen. The back door of the house opened. Footsteps, at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 people. "She's in there," her father said. Chrissy's heart stuttered, then found a new and faster beat. "This isn't going to be quick," said another man. Chrissy did not recognize his deep, slightly raspy voice. "You see, it's more complicated with a child. Shattuck's not sure we're even ready for the children yet. It's risky. She's got to be converted, Tucker." That was Chrissy's mother. Sharon. Though she did not sound like herself, it was her voice all right, but without its usual softness, without the natural musical quality that had made it such a perfect voice for reading fairy tales. "Of course, yes. It's got to be done. She's got to be done," said the stranger, whose name was evidently Tucker. "I know that. Shattuck knows it too. He sent me here, didn't he? I'm just saying it might take more than usual. We need a place where we can restrain her and watch her over during the conversion." "Right here, her bedroom upstairs." "Conversion?" Trembling, Chrissy got to her feet and stood facing the door. With a scrape and clatter, the tilted chair was removed from under the knob. She held the spray can in her right hand, drawn at her side, and half behind her, with her forefinger on top of the nozzle. The door opened, and her father looked in. He looked at her. Alex Foster. Chrissy tried to think of him as Alex Foster, not as her father, just Alex Foster. But it was difficult to deny. In some ways, he was still her dad. Besides, Alex Foster was no more accurate than father because he was someone altogether new. His face was no longer warped with rage. He appeared more like himself, thick blonde hair, a broad, pleasant face, with bold features, a smattering of freckles across his cheeks and nose. Nevertheless, she could see a terrible difference in his eyes. He seemed to be filled with a strange urgency, an edgy tension. Hungry, yes, that was it. Daddy seemed hungry, consumed by hunger, frantic with hunger, starving. But for something other than food, she did not understand his hunger. But she sensed it, a fierce need that engendered a constant tension in his muscles, a need of such tremendous power. So hot that waves of it seemed to rise from him, like steam from boiling water. He said, "Come out of there, Christine." If this is interesting to you, please be sure to boop that like button. You'll help the video spread to other people. And thank you very much. He said, "Come out of there, Christine." Chrissy let her shoulders sag, blinked as if repressing tears exaggerated the shivers that swept through her, and tried to look small, frightened, defeated. Reluctantly, she edged forward. Come on, he said impatiently, motioning her out of the pantry. Chrissy stepped through the doorway and saw her mother, who was beside and slightly behind Alex. Sharon was pretty. Auburn hair, green eyes, but there was no softness or motherliness about her anymore. She was hard-looking and changed and full of the same barely contained nervous energy that filled her husband. By the kitchen table stood a stranger in jeans and plaid hunting jacket. He was evidently the Tucker to whom her mother had spoken, tall, lean, all sharp edges and angles. His close-cropped black hair bristled. His dark eyes were set under a deep, bony brow. His sharply ridged nose was like a stone wedge driven into the center of his face. His mouth was a thin slash. And his jaws were as prominent as those of a predator that preyed on small animals and snapped them in half with one bite. He was holding a physician's black leather bag. Her father reached for Chrissy as she came out of the pantry, and she whipped up the can of WD-40, spraying him in the eyes from a distance of less than 2 feet. A psh! Even as her father howled in pain and surprise, Chrissy turned and sprayed her mother, too, straight in the face. Half blinded, they fumbled for her, but she slipped away from them and dashed across the kitchen. Tucker was startled, but managed to grab her by the arm. She spun toward him and kicked him in the crotch. He did not let go of her, but the strength went out of his big hands. She tore herself away from him and sprinted down the stairs into the hallway and away. That is the end of chapter 3. Wow! Oh, incidentally, if you have WD-40 and you need to keep some water around, spray some of that into it. It's 90% fish oil, and mosquitoes will not grow. But that's just a tip from the hopester. Okay, that was chapter 3. Thank you so much for watching my little brand of insanity as we delve into this great, great book. All right. Well, I'll see you again in chapter 4.